Joining us now in studio, Ambassador Dani Dayan, Consul General of Israel here in New York. And Ambassador, why is the Golan Heights, why is it so significant, given that Israel has had control over this for 52 years? Why is this sort of symbolic gesture by the president so important?
I think it's much more than symbolic. It's a diplomatic recognition. A diplomatic recognition, you're right, of a reality, exactly like the recognition of Jerusalem being the capital of the State of Israel. But in world politics, in world diplomacy, those formalities, those recognitions are extremely important. You know, the president tweeted that it's good for the State of Israel, but it's also good for regional stability. And it's indeed good for Israel, but it's indeed also good for regional stability. I think it would, the recognition by the United States of America of Israel's sovereignty of the Golan will contribute hugely to regional stability.
As far as regarding diplomatic stability around the world, I wonder if we can pull out a little bit, because there are a number of critics at the United Nations and even NATO who have been condemning Russia's annexation of Crimea for the past 5 years. And they say that what Donald Trump has done today undercuts that condemnation of Russia.
It's a completely different scenario. First of all, the Golan Heights were captured in a defensive war. Syria and Egypt tried to annihilate Israel from the Golan Heights and from the Sinai Peninsula.
The 67 war was started by Israel.
No, it was technically, Israel did a preemptive strike, but it was started by the closure of the Tiran Straits. You know, David, one of the very few advantages of being young, and not being young, is that I remember 1967.
But surely
I remember the exasperation, I remember the agony, I remember the explicit, chilling declarations that what the Syrians intend to do from the Golan Heights.
But you can, I'm sure, appreciate the exasperation that people in Crimea have about Russia's invasion 5 years ago.
Yeah, but again, I don't want to talk about Russia and Crimea. There was a completely unprovoked situation. Here we are talking a different situation. And we are talking about 52 years in which Syria refused to make peace with Israel, in which Syria is using its territory to allow Iran, a genocidal regime, an anti-Semitic regime, to entrench itself in order to attack Israel. Therefore, there are all the difference in the world between the two scenarios that you mentioned.
Do you recognize that this would be helpful to Prime Minister Netanyahu's re-election in 2.5 weeks?
You know, David, there are two things I am preventing from talking about as an Israeli diplomat is domestic American politics and domestic Israeli politics.
But I have a feeling that you know that this is going to be helpful to Netanyahu. Should it have been?
I think you know as much as I know.
Exactly.
It's a personal opinion.
So to take the politics out of it would have been perhaps more helpful to Israel if President Trump had waited until after the Israeli election to make this announcement.
Again, the sooner the better. I think it was long overdue, exactly like the recognition of Jerusalem as capital of Israel. I am glad that it happened. I am glad. I would be even happier if it would have happened a year ago, or 2 years ago, or 10 years ago. Now it happened. I think it's a good reason for celebration. By the way, in Jerusalem, now we are celebrating Purim yet because it's 1 day delayed. So you know, 2 reasons to celebrate.
Well, we always celebrate when Dani Dayan is here in studio. He is the Consul General of Israel here in New York, and good to see you. Thanks for doing this. I appreciate it.